So how on earth did it happen? How did Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party go from a tiny, practically unknown group to taking over one of the most powerful countries in Europe? Today, we're going to trace that exact path, step by step, and we're going to focus on exactly what you need to know to build a fantastic exam answer on the topic. All right, here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the party's super early days, and then we'll look at their first, totally disastrous attempt to grab power. Then we'll see how a worldwide crisis basically handed them the opportunity of a lifetime, before digging into the sneaky political deal that finally put Hitler in charge. And to top it all off, we'll get right into what your examiners are really looking for. Getting this sequence right is everything. So what's the big puzzle we're trying to solve? It is right here on this chart. Look at this. In 1928, the Nazis were basically a political joke. They had just 12 seats in the German parliament, a tiny fraction. But fast forward just 4 years, and boom, they are the biggest party in the country with 230 seats. How in the world does that happen? That's the core question we're answering today. Okay, let's rewind the clock all the way back to the beginning, to the chaos and bitterness in Germany right after World War I. Hitler didn't actually create the party. He just found it. It was this little political discussion group in a Munich beer hall. But he was such a powerful speaker and so driven that he basically took it over in no time. He completely transformed it, made it his own, and gave it the name we all recognize, the Nazi Party. So, what was their sales pitch? It was all laid out in their 25-point program. And you've got to admit, from a political point of view, it was a clever mix of ideas designed to tap into all the anger people were feeling. Promise to tear up the hated Treaty of Versailles? Check. Vow to crush communism? Check. Give people scapegoats, like the Jewish community? Check. And promise a strong, stable government to fix everything? Double check. It was a potent message for a broken nation. And let's be clear, they weren't just about making speeches. Hitler created his own private army, the SA, or the Brown Shirts. Their job was twofold. Sure, they protected Nazi leaders in meetings, but their real purpose was to go out and intimidate, to beat up their political opponents, and to physically break up the meetings of rival parties. They were all about projecting strength and violence from day one. So with a clear message and his own band of thugs, Hitler was feeling pretty confident. In 1923, he decided, you know what, the time is now. He tried to take power by force. It was an absolute, total disaster, and probably the best thing that ever happened to his career. So the plan seemed simple enough. Storm a beer hall where local government leaders are meeting and force them at gunpoint to support a revolution. But yeah, it fell apart almost instantly. The leaders agreed, then as soon as they left, they went back on their word. The next day's march through Munich was a fiasco, the police opened fire, and it was all over. Hitler actually fled and hid, but was found and arrested a couple days later. A complete, humiliating failure. Okay, now this next part is absolutely crucial, especially if you're writing an essay on this. On the surface, the putsch was a huge failure. Hitler's in jail, the party's banned. It looks like it's over. But look at the long-term wins. His trial was a media circus that made him a household name all over Germany. And it forced him to realize something vital. Trying to overthrow the government with violence wasn't going to work. He had to win power legally, through elections. And while in his comfy prison cell, he wrote his book, Mein Kampf, which basically became the Nazi instruction manual. Now, for the next few years, things got quiet. See, the German economy actually started to get better, and when people have jobs and food on the table, they tend not to vote for radical extremists. Nazi support just cratered. But Hitler was smart. He used these lean years to completely rebuild the party from the ground up, making sure everyone was loyal to him and him alone. He was getting everything ready for when his next big chance came along. And boy, did that chance come. In 1929, the single most important event for the Nazis' rise to power happened. And it didn't happen in Berlin. It happened thousands of miles away, on Wall Street in New York. The Wall Street crash kicks off the Great Depression. American banks, desperate for cash, immediately call in the loans they've given to Germany. This sets off a devastating chain reaction. Without that American money, German businesses go bust overnight. And that leads to unemployment on a scale that's hard to even imagine. By 1932, 6 million Germans, a third of the entire workforce, had no job. The country was plunged into misery and despair. And this chart shows you exactly what happens to a country's politics when things get that bad. People lose faith in the normal moderate parties. They start looking for extreme answers. And you can see it right here in the 1932 election. Voters abandoned the middle and flocked to the radicals on both sides, the communists and even more so the Nazis, who suddenly became the biggest single party in Germany. So why the Nazis? Why them specifically? Well, it really comes down to a three-part package. First, you had Hitler himself, an incredible, almost hypnotic public speaker who offered simple answers and clear enemies. Second, their propaganda, run by Joseph Goebbels, was brilliant. It was slick, modern, and had a specific message for every single group they wanted to win over. And third, in a time of street fights and chaos, the sight of the disciplined SA marching in formation projected an image of strength and order that a lot of people were desperate for. But here's the thing. Even as the biggest party, Hitler still didn't have a majority. He couldn't just take power. The final step on his journey wasn't about votes or speeches. It was a shady backroom deal, cooked up by a couple of powerful old men who thought they could outsmart him. Okay, so you've got two key players here. The powerful elderly president Hindenburg and a slick conservative politician named Franz von Papen. Now, Hindenburg could not stand Hitler. He thought he was a vulgar little upstart. But von Papen, who wanted to get back into power himself, came up with a cunning plan. He went to Hindenburg and said, "Look, let's make Hitler the chancellor." And this quote, wow, it says it all. This was their logic. Von Papen's plan was to make Hitler chancellor, but then surround him with conservatives in the cabinet. They thought they could use Hitler's popularity to achieve their own goals, and then, once he'd served his purpose, they just toss him aside. They honestly believed they had hired a puppet they could control. It was one of the biggest, most catastrophic political miscalculations in all of history. Okay, we've walked through the whole story, but now for the most important part, right? How do you take all this information and turn it into a top-grade answer that's going to impress an examiner? Let's get into it. Now, listen up because this is the single biggest piece of advice I can give you. Examiners say this all the time. You will lose marks if you just write a list of things that happened. First this happened, then this happened, then this happened. No, a top answer has to show the links. It has to explain how one event caused the next event, which created the opportunity for the one after that. It's a chain reaction. So here's the difference in practice. A good, but not great answer describes events separately. It says, the Beer Hall Putsch failed in 1923, then the Great Depression happened in 1929. A truly great answer connects them. It explains how the very failure of the putsch led to Hitler adopting a new strategy of winning power legally. And that new strategy put the Nazis in the perfect position to take advantage of the chaos when the Depression hit a few years later. See the difference? It's all about connecting the dots. So let's wrap this up. Hitler's rise to power was never guaranteed. It was this weird mix of his own actions, huge strokes of luck, and the mistakes of his enemies. So I'll leave you with a question to think about. What do you think was the single most important turning point? Was it the failure of the putsch, which changed his whole strategy? Was it the Great Depression, an event completely out of his control? Or was it that final fatal backroom deal? Being able to argue for one of those is the sign of a really sharp historical mind.